example, would you deport parents who have entered the US illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on US soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all,
that's an interesting question. So people have wondered, how does he feel? How does Trump feel? This is a hot button question. Would you deport some of these people?
Well, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work.
And I think the thing that he means is the illegal immigrants who are getting paid probably under the table and are getting cheaper wages than some of the Americans. I mean, is that something bad? You want the illegal aliens to not work so people that are Americans can work?
And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border.
So 325,000 kids that are missing. Some could be home. Some could be trafficking, some could be mules, but 325,000 kids. What kind of record keeping are we doing? And he's blaming Kamala.
I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor
Walz is ready.
Do you care to respond to any of the specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things?
Yeah.
Is this a word check or is this really happening?
Well,
Children.
the drug mule is not true, but I will say about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history.
How do we know, though, the drug mules aren't true? People will do anything to get what they want, especially when it's involving drugs.
30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the attorney general of the largest state, a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature.
So do you really think that somebody who's not in power can say, hey, let's hold off on passing this bill so that way I'll still have it as my agenda when I run for president? Would somebody really want to make that deal to make another politician better? Well, I'm going to tell you this. There's no conspiracies. There are some. And that's not anything that's out of the spectrum. Not saying that he would do it, but people do make behind the closed door deals. Trust me, I've run for Congress, I've run for office, I've seen a lot.
You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling him what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
So again, like he said, well, Donald Trump was in office for those 4 years and certain things didn't get done. Ms. Harris was also in office for 3.5 years. Some things didn't get done. I know they say, you know, vice president, you can only say so much, but can't you just whisper in the president's ear? Somebody mentioned that to me not too long ago. They came to me kind of like an angel and they said, President Biden could have done a lot of things with having Miss Harris in his ear. And why didn't they get done? You're watching Keeping It Honest with yours truly, Anthony Parker, the first and maybe last vice presidential debate between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Good question. So if the kids are U.S. citizens, should you separate the parents? And in a humane society, why would somebody separate the kids from the parents? So let's see what reason JD has.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up.
And he said executive order. And he said that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they did executive orders 93 times. So it just showed you don't really need the power of the people. All you need the power of that politician to kind of slant the rules in the way that they want to go. When anybody can come in and executive order and turn over laws that were passed in the regime before you, then that's too much power for anybody.
Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe
Right.
Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country,